This is Kurt Hudson, and today we're going to take a look at Objective Nuremberg, War in Europe in the 1980s, the latest edition of Modern War from Decision Games. It's the first in the 7 Days to the Rhine series. This is the long-anticipated update to the old Central Front series, if you happen to remember that. And so we're starting in southern Germany with U.S. West German forces taking on the Soviets, the East Germans, and the Czechs with an updated, I wouldn't say, having looked at the rules, that it's an updated Central Front series because the friction points are gone. Artillery units and air assets, to include combat aviation, electronic warfare, are all now asset markers, and we have the introduction of refugees. Also, the roads on the map only shows autobahns, so not a direct lift to the Central Front series, and not necessarily a strict update of that friction point system. So as you look at this, this is everything you get when you order it directly from Strategy and Tactics Press. And funny enough, the game arrived before I got my shipping notice. What a great job, guys. Thanks. The one thing that I always appreciate is I get the latest Desert Fox Games game listing with every magazine. It's everything in their inventory. Prices may be what they are. You can always look at Board Game Geek's market history to see if it's too high or too low. But I have found over the years that I've been able to find some games I couldn't find anywhere else. Enough with all of that. Let's talk about what I've been waiting for a long time. The next in the Central Front series, 7 Days to the Rhine. First thing we'll cover is the Modern War magazine, as usual, is very well done. Glossy pages, nice pictures, and something that Strategy and Tactics has been doing forever. And the 3 magazines with games that Decision Games still produce does the same. The feature article for the magazine is about the game itself. Objective Nuremberg, War in Europe in the 1980s. And what I appreciate the most as a guy that's been in the Army for a long time and also been wargaming for a long time is the article doesn't use any photos from the Cold War that I have seen in the past. That's excellent. That's hard to do as well. The article's by Ty Bomba, who also designed the 7 Days to the Rhine series, and is quite a great guy to talk to if you ever get a chance to chat with him via email, on Facebook. I've never met him in person, but he seems like a great guy. As you go through this, it'll give you comparisons of the plans of the two sides, conventional forces, has an interesting sub-article on nuclear and chemical warfare, actually shows you the plotted radiation spread over time if one or the other side used tactical nuclear weapons, which I always found very interesting, having been in the Army and have to train in chemical protective gear for quite a bit of time. I never look forward to that. Also gives you kind of a one over the world. This is, the main corridors of advance through Central Europe. The next page actually has a pretty helpful map that tells you in broad terms at the Army level, this is how the Pact would execute their attacks, and which nicely sets up starting with the game itself. Sorry for that brain fart. Which can give you an idea of how this would all shake out. Really enjoy the articles. I'm sure this one is going to be excellent. Won't go through any of the other contents of the magazine, but there you have it. And anything that's got M1 tanks on the cover, don't care what they're doing. They could even be hooked up to an M88 recovery vehicle, but M1 tanks are damn sexy. So you never go wrong with a picture of an M1. Makes a guy as ugly as me look good. Go to the rules next. You've got the series rules and the individual game rules in each magazine. I always like the detachable rules without having to take out the staples that Strategy and Tactics Press is doing now. This is the game for issue 47, The other games will come out every other issue, so 49 will be the next game in the series. The first group of rules from the introduction all the way through the combat rules are standard for all the games. And then you get into scenario rules, which is about 2 pages for each game, which gives you the specifics of Objective Nuremberg. And I'll discuss some of the unique aspects of that at the end. What you see is pretty common to all war game rules. A description of the scale, about 4 kilometers per hex. U.S. or NATO units are battalions. Warsaw Pact units are regiments. The assets are aggregates of similar echelons of combat aviation, air support, EW assets. You have a wide array of units from U.S. Armored Cavalry, Soviet tank and airborne divisions. The unique thing that I can't wait to read the rules on, though, is the German territorials and the refugees, and I'll show you those when we look at the counters. The only factor on the counters is the combat factor. Movement factors are by unit type, which is included in the rule book. Hex control, pretty standard fare, I think. When you get in the sequence of play, you have a move fight or fight move sequence with different advantages to how you play out each of those. You've got 2 day turns and 1 night turn per day for a total of 12 turns or 4 days, 96 hours. The individual turn sequence, as you can see, air superiority, electronic warfare. Warsaw Pact has the strategic initiative, so they'll go first. You'll decide your movement or combat phase, combat or movement phase, then the NATO player turn, then the administrative phase. All pretty straightforward. There are different advantages for picking which sequence you're going to use, and then there are slightly different rules for day-night turn. And then also, interestingly enough, is the artillery attrition, which I can't wait to see. I was curious how TIE was going to play out, not having all the Soviet artillery regiments at every echelon in the counter mix, and then, of course, the U.S. artillery battalions, and then any corps battalions. I think it will be interesting to see how that rule plays out. Same thing for your helicopters, combat support, markers. And then as you look through, you got air superiority, air power effects on movement and combat. Electronic warfare will be interesting. Both sides had distinct doctrines and were very different based on the assets they employed of how this was going to play out. So I'm really interested into getting that one into the game. I've only played a couple of games, one being Drive on Frankfurt that had the actual signal units both sides would use to play out that part of the battlefield. Your typical stacking limits, when to check, zones of control, all laid out. You got airborne units, you can air assault some heliborne units, so pretty much all of the options available to a commander during this time period. Gets into all the different types of terrain, natural and man-made. I'm sure you've seen that before. The addition of refugees, which I think will be fascinating. Without all the minor roads on the map that you saw in the old Central Front series, where essentially every hex had some form of road or trail in it, it'll be interesting to see how the refugees move. Combat is pretty much at 4 kilometers per hex, adjacent units, and then you put in your asset markers. I think one thing TIE has updated, which will be good, is limitations on how many combat support markers each side can throw into an individual combat, starting, I bet, with the initiative or the phasing player first. Also, your terrain modifiers, combat results, pretty much what you might expect. Attacker eliminated, attacker lost, defender eliminated, defender retreat, defender loss, engaged, which may be like what I've seen in other games. I'm not sure yet. Exchange, which I think we all know. The momentum attacks and the probing attacks will be interesting, as I think only the U.S. and the West Germans have recon units, so be interested to see how the probing attack works, as that was not the doctrinal term the U.S. and NATO used for how they would use cavalry in counterattacks, but may simulate it. The specific rules, again, are 2 pages and part of another page. It gets into setup. It gets into order determination. The Warsaw Pact player secretly and randomly draws his victory conditions. That's new. Kind of reminds everybody, even the big army commanders at the 4-star level have a boss. So as you see there, draws blindly and secretly one of 3 victory conditions. Of course, the Soviets know what the victory conditions are, but the NATO player doesn't. It even gives you advice on, if you get the defensive mission called strategic block, how you can still simulate or use deception to make the NATO player think you've got a different one. Goes into your reinforcements and closes with the victory conditions. Combat results table right there. I'll probably, if permission allows, I'll photocopy that so that it's not in the rule book. Same for the terrain effects chart. As you can see, we'll transition to the map. Beautiful glossy map printed on paper. The city of Nuremberg itself with the airfield just to the northeast. Erlangen, if you ever served in U.S. Army Forces Europe, United States Army Europe, you may recognize Würzburg, Kitzingen, Schweinfurt, Bad Kitziken. All these places that I visited when I was stationed over there brings back many fond memories. Amberg, Bayreuth, the Hof Gap. I'll let you take a quick look at that. Terrain on the side, turn marker on the side. Of course, we're looking at it from west to east from the NATO perspective. Pretty straightforward. Nothing I don't think that would throw anyone that's gamed more than once in what they're doing. Woods, rough terrain, urban terrain, Autobahn hexes, all in the shot there. River hexes. Covers all your terrain types and clear terrain, of course. The East German border trace and Czechoslovakia, which I'm covering now. As you come up the map, gives you an idea of how the map is laid out. Now let's look at the counters. Nice counters. Pretty straightforward. We'll take a look at the U.S. 1st Armored Division, 1-1 Cav up there in the upper left corner. Very prestigious cavalry regiment with a long history. 13th Armored, 35th Armored, 37th Armored, Patton's finest. 2-1 Cav. Sorry, not 2-1 Cav, but 46 Infantry, all here. The mighty 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment with another long and distinguished history for you. 3rd Infantry Division, 3-7 Cav, famed Gary Owen Regiment, 15th Infantry. All units, if you've ever served in the U.S. Army, have a long lineage with a lot of honors. 3rd of the 63rd Armored, 1st of the 64th, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, so the whole dang regiment in 3rd Infantry Division of the 64th Armored. Very, very famous unit. Took part in the drive on Baghdad in 2003. Look at the West Germans, the asset markers, as you can see, for close or combat aviation, U.S. artillery, West German combat aviation, West German artillery. The 26th Luftland brigade or division, and then the West German units. Refugees. Looks like mom's pulling her daughter. Heartbreaking counter there. And then the West German territorials and Soviet air assets. You got the Soviets, 103rd Guards Airborne Division. Give them some asymmetric capability, if you will, meaning not tank on tank, but an airborne division potentially to cut off a retreat, seize strategic river crossing or airfield to open up another avenue of advance. 6 Guards tank, I remember from all my studies as a young lieutenant. Then you got the East Germans, and then you got the Czechs. Each nationality has its own combat aviation and artillery assets. And then you see the objective counters for the Soviet that, again, is a blind draw. The EW markers, all the units are one step. As we flip it over, you'll see that all that's on the back is the starting position for the Soviets, and then the counters on the backside are the EW and air assets for NATO. And there's a good look at starting positions. So essentially one-step units. You got now I'm drawing a blank. U.S. 7th Corps, if I'm right, with their German allies, against the Soviets, East Germans, and Czechs. I will post a video of some playthrough later this week. I'm still sorting through the whole telework thing. It's fascinating to me how your day changes, and takes longer sometimes to get simple things done. But as I sort through teleworking and get things done at work, I will also try to get some turns played of Objective Nuremberg Volume I, 7 Days to the Rhine series of game. Hope you enjoyed this overview and component review. Stay safe and have a great day.